and welcome to Roz's Random Ramblings. I haven't posted in a bit, not because I was on vacation, I wish, but because of technical difficulties. However, I think I have them all straightened out now. I mean, if you're listening to this, then that means the problems have been solved. And if you're not listening to this, well then, this sentence is absurd. In this episode, I'm going to talk about musical instruments, mainly the banjo, but I do want to warn people that there is a little talk about slavery and historical racism in the US. Also, if you're very sensitive to things like the death of animals, then you might want to skip this episode. I try to be as sensitive as I can to people's feelings, but it's surprisingly difficult to talk about musical instruments without mentioning some racism and harm to animals. Sadly, we have to face the fact that ugly things have happened so that we can make beautiful things like music. I mean, the first musical instruments were most likely bone flutes and drums made from animal skins, so with beauty sometimes comes sacrifice. Like, I guess a lot of people would think I'd look prettier if I exercised more, ate fewer carbs, and lost weight, but that's a sacrifice I'm not willing to make, so I'll put up with a moderate amount of exercise, loads of bread and dessert, and looking the way I do. Probably a bad example. Oh well. This episode's question is, why the banjo? And refers to my seemingly sudden desire to teach myself how to play the banjo some years ago. For background, I was originally teaching myself how to play the cello, but ended up getting a friend to turn my cello into art and switching to banjo. The reason for me dropping the cello isn't complicated. I'd actually been asked if I'd like to join a small orchestra or play for various things, but I only had a student cello, which did not have a good sound. But buying a new cello at that time, which was about 20 years ago, would have cost me around $10,000 for a barely acceptable instrument, and I was thinking of going back to school to get my doctorate degree. Still not sure I made the right choice, but I went back to school and gave up on the cello. I did want to play music once in a while though, so I decided on the banjo. But why? And this brings us to the second consideration. Obviously, I was looking for something less expensive than a cello, so why not a more conventional instrument like a guitar? They're versatile, relatively light, commonly used in a wide range of music, and so ubiquitous as to be practically a dime a dozen compared to high-end instruments. Or how about a piano? I mean, people literally give away acoustic pianos. I've seen ads offering some nice full and baby grands for free. One of them, a 100-year-old classic. And electric keyboards can be very affordable and much more portable than a grand piano. So why not a guitar or piano? Why a banjo? Some people might think it's because I was trying to be unique or different, and honestly, that's probably part of it. But more importantly, I have always liked the sound of the banjo, which is itself unique and different. These days, banjos are primarily associated with bluegrass music, which I do kind of like, and are sometimes incorporated into contemporary music to add a rustic feel. But the banjo's use wasn't always so narrowly defined. Banjos were common in the early days of jazz, got incorporated into folk music, are often heard in musical theater, and have been incorporated into Irish and Celtic music as well as Caribbean. The point is that banjos have been played in a wide variety of musical genres to which they bring their own unique sound. But where did that unique sound come from anyway? Quick, humorous personal aside. My sister, the singer, occasionally goes to sing at old folks' homes for church services or various special events. I played a recording of her singing on the episode about spicy Korean food, in case you're interested. She once asked me to accompany her on my banjo, which I did, but it clearly took a while for people to accept me and my banjo. Because the banjo was a weird choice for church music? Yes, but the bigger issue became obvious when I heard one of the elderly people loudly whisper, "I've never seen a woman play a banjo before." So, apparently, in addition to the instrument being unexpected, the person playing it was just a little off. Thanks for noticing. Back to the banjo, and here's where I want to talk about the history of the banjo and why it has such a unique sound. Your first instinct might be to point to the shape of it. It's definitely round, especially compared to guitars and cellos, which have that double curvy shape to them that makes them look like, well, a woman's torso, if I'm going to be honest. Ooh la la. Actually, though, there are other stringed instruments that are kind of round. Lutes are teardrop-shaped, which is more round than a guitar, and they also have those rounded backs. And then there's the lyre, that's L-Y-R-E, not to be confused with a person who lies. Lyres tend to have a roundish shape to them, or at least bowl lyres do. But yeah, banjos are fairly uniquely round, at least for Western instruments. Fun fact! A very common instrument in much Asian music is the Chinese erhu, which is also a stringed instrument, though it is much smaller than a banjo and generally played very differently. It has only 2 strings and is played with a bow. The name erhu literally means 2 strings. The bow is strung between them and you play different notes by lightly touching the strings higher up while bowing. I know this because I had an erhu for a while, though I don't remember where or how I got it. It's very similar to a Korean instrument called a haegum, with one rather significant difference, which I discovered when my friend's dog would growl every time he came close to my erhu. It turns out that erhus were traditionally made by stretching a snakeskin, preferably python, across the soundbox, which is still done sometimes today, though they are starting to switch to man-made products. But that dog sniffed out the snake on my erhu and was not impressed. My fun fact is not entirely random for once, as banjos also used to have an animal skin strung across the pot, though rarely a snake. Mind you, I did find a couple snake banjos. However, banjo makers primarily used goat, calf, or cow hides and would fit them raw instead of tanning them, making the drum head stiff. Nowadays, the vast majority of banjos are made with mylar, and not just because it's kinder to animals. Mylar is more resistant to fluctuations in temperature and humidity than animal-based instrument parts, and that goes for all instruments and all parts, like strings. Some die-hard banjo aficionados still insist on having animal skins for banjo drum heads because they say it has the best sound, though I'm fine with the mylar. Using non-organic materials for musical instruments is generally a better option for keeping your instrument and your animals healthy and happy. Fun fact! You may have heard of catgut strings and thought, did they really use catgut for strings? And the answer is no, they didn't. They used cow, sheep, and goat guts, or intestines to be specific. In fact, the name catgut is believed to be an abbreviation of cattle gut, since that was mainly what was used for the strings. Because, you know, our ancestors liked to use every part of the animal. But the point of going into such gory detail about how banjos were made is because a lot of that is what makes their sound so unique. Unlike guitars and cellos, banjos don't have a wooden cover with a hole, but a taut and unbroken skin known as a drumhead. That drumhead makes the banjo different, especially among European instruments. Most European instruments made with animal skins were drums, which had skins stretched across in the same way as the banjo. I once got to play a traditional Irish drum called a bodhrán that was made from cowhide and had to be dampened every time it was played, but no strings are involved when playing those drums. The only European stringed instrument with a drum head that I could find is the Balkan gussel, which is a single-stringed instrument played with a bow and believed to have originally come from our Asian friends erhu. Which brings us to the other thing that makes the banjo so unique. It's a drum with strings that get plucked, not played with a bow. Clearly not like the European or Asian instruments. So where did the banjo come from? Africa, of course. Oh, now that's something we haven't heard in a while. Yes, that brash and bold banjo sound came out of Africa, which is clear when you look into the etymology or word origins. The word banjo came from either the Kimbundo word mbanza or Mandinka banjul, both of which sound a lot like banjo. And it should be obvious that the instrument came to North America with the African slaves. But in case it isn't obvious, we know they came from Africa because Thomas Jefferson, who was among the first people to describe a banjo, said the slaves brought the instrument from Africa. And of course you know, if a white guy says it, then it must be true. Jefferson, who called the instrument a banjar, said they were made from gourds and animal skin for the body, sticks for the neck, and horsehair or catgut for the strings. Making their own banjos clearly wasn't difficult for the slaves, since everything they needed was probably the stuff their owners didn't want anyway. The drum was made from the unused shell of gourds, the drum head could be made from leftover scraps of untanned animal leather, the strings from the intestines, and sticks are plentiful where there are trees. Hey presto, a little sound of home. But wait, you may say, what about the frets? And for those of you who didn't say that because you have no idea what I'm talking about, say what? Frets are those little strips of metal that go across the neck of a banjo or guitar. These made their first appearance on lutes in the 1600s, on guitars in the 1700s, but wouldn't be put on banjos for another century after that, after the American Civil War. Until then, banjos were fretless. Another quick personal aside. My banjo is fretless, not because it was made that way. I bought my banjo in South Korea at a really cool music complex they have not far from Insadong, in case you're ever in the area. However, I had some problems with a couple of frets that were causing a ringing sound, and when I took it to a Korean repair shop, well, let's just say the situation got worse. Shortly after that, I got to Iowa and found a banjo maker who could repair it, but also suggested I go fretless because I was already accustomed to that from playing the cello and it would lower the action. I then had to have action explained to me, and it just means the length of time the strings vibrate or make sound. In other words, how long they act. Because most banjo playing is picking or claw hammer, you don't want the strings to vibrate very long or the sound gets kind of muddy. For a clean sounding banjo, you want low action. So I got the banjo maker to switch my banjo to fretless, which also took care of the ringing that had caused all the problems in the first place. Serendipity! But back to the Deep South, where the sounds of the slaves' banjos was gaining the attention of the white folk. Initially, banjos were pretty much a slave thing, eventually spreading to other poor people, and were therefore considered kind of a lower-class instrument. It wasn't until the early 1800s that a man named Joel Walker Sweeney began seeing some potential for utilizing the banjo more broadly and bringing it to the stage. He is often credited with giving banjos an upgrade, mostly by replacing the gourd with a wooden body and standardizing to 5 strings, one being the drone string. Unfortunately, Sweeney was a bit, well, racist. I know we're supposed to interpret people within the context of their times, but when Sweeney couldn't get audiences to come to his shows, he started performing in blackface, which I feel is justifiably called racist because it was an offensive and lazy way to draw a crowd. If he'd been a better musician, he shouldn't have needed to resort to a racist gimmick. Also, first he steals their sound and then he mocks them with it. That's shameful, though all too familiar to African Americans. Unfortunately, thanks to Sweeney, blackface banjo playing became a trend in minstrel music of the mid-1800s, and my poor banjo might have been destined to be a relic of a long-gone and rather offensive time, but was eventually saved by the fact that the sound of the instrument became popular and was incorporated into various styles and bands that had nothing to do with the blackface minstrel shows. In fact, some, like jazz, were a way for African American people to reclaim their heritage and make it their own again. I do love a bit of banjo in that old-timey jazz sound. And with the rise of those new musical styles, many instrument manufacturers began adding banjos to their lineup of ingenious instruments, which is also when the shape of the banjo, including frets, became standardized. Banjos do have some variations, of course. A jazz banjo, or plectrum, tends to have 4 strings rather than 5, as that number fits the style better. One can find banjos in a variety of sizes as well. In fact, for a brief period in the early 1900s, banjo orchestras were popular and included piccolo banjos, banjolales, banjorines, tenor, cello, and bass banjos, in addition to the standard banjo. It's still possible to find most of those variations, but most banjos today are 5-string, fretted, and cruelty-free. And there we have it, the banjo which sits in my living room waiting to be played. And now I need to answer the question, why the banjo? It's a personal choice, of course, but the banjo has a unique sound forged in its heritage. The banjo is like no other instrument and is far more flexible than many of us give it credit for. Need a little pick-me-up? Try Danny Barker playing Tiger Rag. That always makes me smile. Feeling laid back and easy? Give Elmer Snowden's Up a Lazy River a listen. Watching him play is amazing. I've never seen anyone play up on the neck quite like that. Or maybe you're looking for a dark and haunting sound, in which case you may need Doc Boggs playing Oh Death. His raspy voice makes it all the more eerie. And if you're looking for something a bit avant-garde, check out Kurt Weill's early musical theater work. Something for everyone. Mostly, though, I play the banjo because I don't want to get stuck in a rut. Sure, those other instruments are more common, but there's so much to be gained from the uncommon. Give it a try. Well, I've been teaching English to a fun bunch of French-Canadian college students, which has again reminded me that English is, in some ways, also uncommon, mostly because of its history. Just like the banjo. Next episode, I thought I'd talk a bit more about the history of English. Specifically, I'm going to try and answer the question, why does English have so many French words? Stay tuned for that. This has been Roz's Random Ramblings. Almost everything was done by me, Roz Hirsch, because I haven't been able to train my cat Babesy to do anything. She's pretty stubborn. She insists she can't help me because she doesn't have opposable thumbs, though I don't see the necessity when it comes to computers. The thing I don't do is create the music for each episode, most of which comes from the website epidemicsound.com. Here's a list of the music for this episode. The intro music was Hailstorm Jig by Myrtle and Bert Torrance. This came from the website classic-banjo.ning.com. Lots of great classic banjo music there. The remaining songs come from the website epidemicsound.com and include the following: Running to Recess by American Legion, which played near the beginning. J.S. Bach's Cello Suite No. 1 in G Major Prelude, performed by Eric Jacobson, which played while I was deciding to give up the cello. Roots by Northside and Piano Lullaby, a traditional song, both of which played briefly while I talked about not wanting to play guitar or piano. Where Do We Go Now by Arvid Svenningsson, whose name I'm finally able to say on the first try. This song played while I talked about playing banjo in church. Milyang Arirang by Bokyeon Kim, which played during the part about the erhu even though it's a traditional Korean song, not Chinese. It does have a hagum though. New Orleans Diner by Sight of Wonders, which played a couple of times. Call of the Jungle by Sahara Skylight, which played while I talked about Africa. Tumbleweed by Roots and Recognition, which played while the racist guy was co-opting banjo music. And finally, Farmer's Lunch Break by Stationary Sign, which is playing right now. I post new episodes every Monday at noon, Mountain Daylight Time, assuming nothing goes wrong, so please keep downloading. And as always, thanks for listening.